Hello, Kate here, and today we're going to talk about how to prevent burnout when creating your course. There's a couple of reasons for burnout. We have to really think about what is causing the burnout. And in my experience, I would say that a lot of times it comes down to time crunches and deadlines. You feel like you can't get everything done in the time frame that you set up for yourself. Another one is you feeling like you can't get it right. You try over and over again. You do one take, you do another take, and you just can't get it right. The third one that I'm going to talk about today is feeling like maybe you're not coming across like you want. Like you're trying to come across professional, or you're trying to come across in the sense of what you think a course creator or a course presenter or a facilitator should come across as. So let's dive into each one of these because they are so common. It almost always comes down to what you're thinking. And I know that feels like it's your fault, and I don't mean it that way, but the power in recognizing that it's what you're thinking that's causing a lot of this burnout is that you have the opportunity to change that. You have the opportunity to change your deadlines too. So that's another one. So let's get into that first one and let's figure out how we can reframe this particular problem and so that it can be seen as a beautiful way to change your thought process. And this is really important to change how you feel while you're creating your course, right? This should be fun. I love creating courses and I want you to love it too. So the first one is to remind yourself of the goal. And the goal, is connection and the goal is results. A lot of times we think that the goal is to get this task done by this date. And that is flexible. Most of the time you are not needing to get something done by that date. And if you're having trouble with setting up time frames for how to get something done, be sure to give me a call or talk to somebody else who's an expert in course creation. So many times when we're unfamiliar with a task, like we've never created a course before, or we're fairly new, or maybe you created a mini course before about something that was super familiar to you, and now you're creating a new course and maybe it's bigger and maybe it's a topic that's not as familiar or an audience that you're not as familiar with, that's going to require a little bit more time to get into. I mean, it's not just about the content. You kind of have to really know the audience. And I go into that in another video, so I'm not going to go into it here. But your deadlines are important because of what they give you, but they're also flexible. So change it. The most important goals that you have in creating courses or any sort of programs or pretty much anything that you're doing where you're going to help other people, number one is connection. What can you do to foster a really great connection with other people? And the second is results, like getting results for the people. Now, I can tell you in my experience, I used to work in retail and I worked in retail for 10 years. So I'd be in the store and I'd be putting up merchandise or making merchandise look nice, or I'd be doing some administrative tasks and a customer would walk in and it would feel like, oh, this is an interruption of my task. And you have to reframe it and go, no, Kate, the customers are the most important thing. They're not interrupting your task. They are the task. The customers are the reason I'm creating that merchandise or doing the administrative paperwork. And so customers can't interrupt you. Sometimes when you have course deadlines, it's the same thing. Like I'm working on creating a course so I can help people. And then somebody will reach out to you and I don't have time for this. That's actually a problem, right? The people reaching out to you creates the connections that you're looking for. And even if that person who's reaching out to you isn't an ideal connection for your audience, they might know somebody who is. So try to reframe your tasks in such a way that you're making the important things important. And the things that aren't so important, reaching certain deadlines, those are more flexible. Move them along. And I know that can be difficult if you've already obligated yourself to a particular date. So maybe we should be careful about those dates that we choose, right? And if you find yourself in a time crunch, get some help. Okay, get some help and you can accomplish those particular tasks. So that is about how to prevent burnout when it comes to deadlines and that sort of thing. And I found that very helpful. Deadlines to me, they just move along. I'm more interested in creating quality. I'm more interested in connection and results than I am in getting something out by a certain date. Now, the second reason is you feel like maybe you're not doing this right. This can create burnout. This like, I've done, I've done this task over and over again, and I just can't seem to get the words right. And I want to say, let's back up a step. Just do your very best in that particular situation. But before you get into that situation, let me remind you that course creation works best when you are thinking about it as an iterative process. There is a way to create a course with a laid back, relaxed way that is going to get it done in a longer amount of time, but a better product. So a lot of times when people create courses, they tend to think of courses very similar to a book. So a lot of times when people create courses, they tend to think about courses like a book where you outline your book, you work super, super hard, you burn yourself out to create a book and make the deadline, and then voila, it's done. You get to bask in the process of having it done. You have a completed book that is just yours. Creating a course isn't quite like that. If you were going to write a book the way you did a course versus creating a course the way you do a book, you would involve the audience in. You might release chapter by chapter in a serial and get people's feedback on that particular chapter and then rewrite it and redo it. That's kind of how course is. So let's just give you a high level overview of an iterative process. I have another video on the iterative process, so I don't want to get into too much depth on it here. But let's think about this. So let's say you have a course about any particular topic and you break it down into the different tasks that are involved. And let's say that you actually released mini courses about each one of these particular tasks. You release the mini course to a small audience doing a minimally viable product. So you don't put in a ton of effort. What you're doing is testing it. So you're testing this particular product to see how it is. And then you talk with the people afterwards. Did you get value in it? How did it work for you? Now, while you're doing this iterative process, while you're doing this early versions of your course, even if you're doing mini segments of your course, which I think is a great idea because it's so doable, like it's so much better. Like instead of doing, I'm going to do all 10 units of my course and I'm going to do it this month, you say, I'm going to do maybe 2 of the portions of this 10-part course this month. I'm going to release early versions of it. And while I'm releasing early versions, I am going to create connection and results with those people who are a part of that early version. Now you're gaining audience, you're building reputation for somebody who cares about the audience, somebody who can create connections and get results. And it hasn't burned you out because you're not trying to do a finished product of 10 different modules in a short time frame. You're doing a smaller chunk of material in that amount of time, and you're really focusing on what matters most. So can you see how much easier that seems? It is easier. So that is so much better than I'm going to work really hard for 1 month and have the perfect product. Furthermore, when you involve your audience in the creation of it, your product is going to be better. You have time to take that early version and make a little changes and tweaks and maybe have some new activities or revise your activities, but you're going to have a better product because you decided to do an iterative process. So how do you like that? I love this idea. I really do. And I really embrace this idea. I generally try to iterate my courses about 4 to 5 times before I finish them. And of course, that can change quite a bit depending on how many of my assumptions about my audience were correct from the start. So the more I know my content, the more I know my audience, the fewer versions that I need, but the less I know my audience and maybe the less I know my content, though that generally isn't the thing. Usually it's the audience that you don't know so well. That is going to take you longer. So that is how you can prevent burnout with an iterative process because you are setting far more reasonable goals for yourself. So the last thing that I want to talk about is this idea that maybe you're not coming across like a facilitator should. So maybe you've seen some really great people present some fantastic content, people that you love, very much, or maybe you've been through a course and you love the way they did that course thing, and you're trying really hard to come across in the way that you saw this person come across, or you're trying to create a course that's very similar to the way that they did the course. But I'm going to tell you that's hogwash. You do not have to come across like somebody else. Remind yourself that you can make your course your course. So your course doesn't have to look, in fact, it should not look like anybody else's course. It should look like what is reflective of your style and what is reflective of your audience. So I know this is that advice of be yourself, which is like, who am I and how does that look? And it can feel risky to go out there and do something that's very different. First of all, go back to those favorite courses that you had and those favorite teachers. What are some aspects that you really like about them? Like maybe you can't be this other person, but maybe you like the way that they inspired somebody and you're like, I really want in this course to inspire other people. Or I like the way that this person used a dynamic voice. So sometimes they were loud and boisterous and other times they were soft and quiet. And I love the way that they did that. I want to see if I can incorporate some of it. In that sense, you're taking aspects that you really feel aligned with and work for you, that you really love, without trying to be that other person. So be inspired by them rather than trying to be like them. And consider what works for you. Like think about, I might think about like, what would be most true for Kate? How does Kate come across? How can I be the most Kate that I've ever been when I'm in front of people? So I tend to be a little bit more soft-spoken. People say that I'm calm and relaxing, which I think is great, but it's not near as like vivacious and dynamic as somebody like, say, my sister. So she is bold and she's brazen and she's like cutting edge, and that's really fabulous. I love the way that she is. But, after 50 some years, of having a sister that's just like that, I'm not going to be her, right? And she's not going to be me. So how can I create a course that embraces the aspects of myself and seeing those aspects of myself not as a liability, but as an asset? Who you are is a super important part of making the connections that you can make. So embrace that part of yourself. Be a bold version of yourself and not a pale copy of somebody else. So I think that when you are trying to embrace yourself and not trying to be like somebody else or facilitate like somebody else, that can relieve a lot of burnout because it takes a lot of energy to try to be somebody else. And it's energy that's not well spent because you can't be somebody else. You can't do it without, just don't do it. That's all I have to say. Don't do it. So I have a lot of other videos where I go into depth about the topics of connecting with your audience, about using an iterative process, like using failure. Failure is a part of an iterative process, and it's a very, very good thing. You want to fail fast. So I have a video that's just on that. And I have other videos that are related to this topic, so check them out. Be sure to subscribe if you like this channel. Be sure to comment. Tell me what topics you're interested in hearing more about, because I'm here with 20 some years of experience of creating courses, and I really want to help you create a course that transfers what you know into the minds and the hearts and the souls and the spirits of your audience so that they can learn from your experience. Isn't that fabulous? I love that there is a way to do that. So have a beautiful day.